Hey, what are you doing? It's time for the review. Insidious Insidious Chapter 2.
Man,
What? What is it?
there's someone behind you.
There's no one there.
It's right there. How do you not see me? It's clearly right over there.
There's nothing there. Hey, what's up, and welcome to another episode of FearFlix. Once again, I'm joined by my good friends Simply Stimpy and King Darenitis. Today we're going to take a look at two of my favorite modern horror films, Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2. Now, the original Insidious is an insane movie. You know, it's not your typical haunted house story. It's written by Leigh Whannell and directed by James Wan, who are most well known for the Saw films, more specifically the first Saw film. Now, one thing I love about James Wan is he's probably my favorite director at this point. He's able to make horror the way that I feel it should be made. You know, it's about the scares, it's about suspense, it's about tension. It's not about blood and gore being thrown at your face at 100 miles an hour in 3D. You know, this is about story, it's about characters, and it's about genuinely leaving you with, with chills and making you, nervous about going to sleep that night.
I had goosebumps most of the movie. Mostly because I didn't know when something was going to happen. It kept me, always on edge. Like, oh shit, what's going to pop out next? What's going to be the next big doom?
You might think it starts off slow in the first movie, but it definitely picks up the pace really quick. I love the subtle little things in the beginning, like, the books on the floor.
I felt like it was slow in the beginning of the first movie, but I did like the first movie more than the second chapter. Just by a smidge. They were really close, but did like the first one more than the second chapter.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing with movies like Paranormal Activity that people don't really get, is that with these haunting type things, if you're familiar with, the paranormal and things like that, it's kind of common knowledge at this point that Paranormal Activity, when it begins, it's very subtle things. It's not a barrage of crazy, demonic activity. It starts off really simple things, like coming back into a room and finding something in a different spot than it was before. Little things like that, and they build over time. That's really the way it goes with this movie.
Like I said while we were watching the movie, if a door closes and it opens more than once, burn the house down. Get out. If I was that person, I'd just be like, I closed you.
And they listen.
You don't open.
They listen. They leave. They leave.
But
the
that
house.
isn't the case. It doesn't just stop after they leave the
Because
house.
the house wasn't the problem.
That's the irony of this.
It was.
Is that the one time a family actually has enough common sense to leave the house?
Yeah, they're like, fuck that, we're out.
It's not the house that's the problem. It's like people finally starting to learn from the family in the Amityville Horror. Shit happens, you get the fuck out and you never come back. You leave all your stuff, make sure you got your dog, and you drive off in the rain. That's all that matters. I really love the story. The story is really interesting to me because it's not your typical horror film story. When I first
definitely not your typical horror story.
Catches you by surprise.
Yes.
Yeah, when I first saw this movie, after it was over, I kind of was thinking about it and going over it in my mind, and it felt like, if you've ever seen the Nickelodeon show Are You Afraid of the Dark, you guys might think this is a little strange comparison, but the different turns that this movie takes it reminded me of a lot of the things that show would do. over the top, but not too over the top. You know, a little almost silly, but not too silly to the point where it wasn't scary.
Yeah.
You know, and
I can see that.
You know, like the faces, and when the father finally goes into the further to get his son back, those images stick in your mind. You know, more specifically that freaking woman's face with the lipstick with the shotgun in her hand.
I thought she was personally very hot.
Yeah, of course, that was his first reaction. That wasn't mine.
It was pretty funny too. I wish we got that on camera. Everybody else was freaked out. I'm just like, I'm pretty attracted to this woman.
Yeah, you know, when I saw it, I was more thinking like, it's gonna be a long time before I get that image out of my head.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing about this movie that's done so well. Are the scares are almost like they go along with the music. The music kind of like, you hear the music burning these images into your mind.
You can't talk enough about the music. You can't talk enough about the music. I thought it was brilliant. I love how they did the music. It wasn't just, you know, random instruments and stuff like that. No, it was, what was it, violin, right?
It's like violin and piano.
Violin and piano.
Totally
and it just,
out of tune.
Yeah,
totally out of tune, and it sounded great. It just completely traumatized you throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, and it's so loud, too. The reason it works so well is because, for example, one of the first scares in the movie, when the mother hears the baby crying and she goes into the baby's room, the shot never goes away. It never cuts to anything else. We follow her into the baby's room, and you see the figure standing behind the baby's cradle. And the music, the funny thing about it is the music doesn't, you don't hear that big loud piano crash.
Until you actually see.
And it's the same time that your brain realizes that there's something there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's amazing about it.
That's what was really clever about that.
You see her walk into the room, and we're noticing what's there at the same time that she's noticing it. And that's the same time that the music crashes. So it all piles onto you, and it's just, it's bone chilling.
Definitely.
And it keeps its effect every time. Every time I've seen this movie, these scares stay with you, and they still give me chills. Anyway.
They still give me chills too. This was I don't even know how many times I've seen this movie. I loved it so much. The first one. The second one I had just watched today. But the first one, it gets me every time. Each scare that they put in there. It's not like it's just a jump scare either. The camera angles aren't jumpy. You know, they're smooth. Yeah. They go into it.
That's what I think makes the jump scares, you know. Although I hate loud noise scares because they're not scares, it's loud noises.
Yes, that's what I didn't like about it. I felt like I liked it when they had like nothing and then boom when you saw the face, but I hated the whole time they're running around doing stuff. You hear the violin. It's like that's the part I don't like. I like it when
that's more build-up music. That's not.
I don't like.
Music.
Yeah, I don't like build-up music in a horror movie. I like you actually to be with the I feel like you're that person, and you're just complete darkness, no sound at all. That's what scares me.
There are movies that work perfectly with no music. A perfect example, the Blair Witch Project. I know you weren't a huge fan of that.
Yeah.
But that movie works perfectly because there is no soundtrack to it.
Yeah.
You know, other than the
I felt like this could have been fine without like as much soundtrack that was in it. I feel like horror movies don't really, in my opinion, don't need that much soundtrack. I feel like they just need a couple strums of the key, and then when you actually see the creature or whatever's in it, boom, like that moment.
The thing I liked about the music, though, is that I was explaining to them earlier, is that when you hear the violin, you know, give that little creepy tone for the build-ups, it makes you feel like, you know, there's a bunch of spiders crawling all over you. So it gives you the same chill that person would be feeling as if they're walking into that room not knowing what they're going to see.
Yeah.
That's what I like.
It doesn't have that effect on me.
And it's very reminiscent of like Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho shower
Yeah, definitely.
Scene, you know, and that's another reason why I think it works so well. And I'll go as far as to say that I think this is probably my favorite soundtrack to a horror movie. Because the music, to me, it's like a character in itself.
Definitely.
You know, in my opinion, before I saw the Blair Witch Project, my #1 scariest movie of all time was The Sixth Sense, because that's another movie that I think the music added so much because it was so chilling and so unsettling. It added so much to those scares because it wasn't a lot of jump scares in that movie. It was a lot of one shot, you know, and then the music is the jump, you know.
I haven't seen many horror movies. I'm not a horror movie guy because most of the time I just don't like to get scared. I don't like and most of the time the movies piss me off rather than actually scare me. I'll just sit there like, oh, come on, what are you doing? But this movie, actually, I liked this movie. Out of all the horror movies I've seen, it's probably one of my favorites. I haven't seen that many, but I actually liked this movie because it was more than just a horror movie. It was interesting and had a good story to it too. Most horror movies are just kind of random scares. This guy out of nowhere that you later find out is a killer comes out and just
It's usually just a bunch of dumb characters tossed into a scenario.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
Let's see how many of them make it out.
Yeah, I don't like that.
This, you have a story that you can tell that somebody sat down and thought about this and actually took time to really write out an interesting and complex story and unique and complex characters. And I think the characters are great in this movie too, and they're all acted really well. They're very likable. This family is very likable. So I think for the first Insidious, you know, I really loved it, and when it first came out, I didn't know that there was going to be a sequel, so I wasn't a huge fan of the ending, the cliffhanger ending, because at the time I was so used to movies, horror movies anyway, that end on a cliffhanger that just make you assume that the bad thing or the, you know, whatever it is, you know, is victorious. You know,
I gotcha.
and there's never any continuation, so I was worried that that really hurt the movie for me. But once the sequel came out and I was able to go see that, and the fact that they continued that story from that cliffhanger made me appreciate and be more accepting of the ending to the first Insidious.
I liked the ending when I first saw it. Like you said, not knowing, I felt like I don't need a happy ending. I never need a happy ending. I think if it's done right, a bad ending can actually be good.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, I usually prefer horror movies with happy endings. I know a lot of people don't, but, you know, I'm a diehard horror movie fan, and I prefer horror movies with happy endings where the good people survive, because I like the idea of people being put, especially in situations where they have to deal with supernatural, otherworldly things that in real life we probably wouldn't be able to defeat. But in these fictional stories, you know, we like to think that these people, these humans, are actually have the power to overcome this, you know, this negativity and this evil, you know, and I've always enjoyed that aspect, and it always just leaves me with a kind of a sour feeling in my stomach when, you know, you see all the main characters or whatever die. It makes it feel like the whole journey was pointless, you know, if it's just gonna be, well, everybody's dead now and now I just feel like shit. But
Yeah, well,
but I do agree with what he was saying before about how unhappy endings can be really good when they're done well. You know, if you look at a movie like The Mist, you know, I love that ending. It's one of my favorite endings to any movie, and it's totally unhappy ending, but it's so well done, and it's such a shocker, and it just tears at your heartstrings.
I haven't seen it, so I don't know.
Hey,
But
me neither.
It'll.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that.
You've seen The Mist?
No, I have not.
Yes, you have.
I have not.
Yes, you have. You're a liar.
I
We
haven't
watched
seen
it
it.
at your
I
house.
don't watch
No, we
scary
didn't.
movies.
We watched it at your house.
We definitely did not
Stop
watch that.
lying or I'll fire you. So after the original Insidious, it was followed by the sequel, Insidious Chapter 2. And going in, I was worried, you know, even though it was being done by the same people, Leigh Whannell and James Wan, who I didn't really have a time to have faith in them as filmmakers yet, because I hadn't seen enough of their work. But I was really pleasantly surprised with it. It took all the things that worked from the first film and kind of adapted on them and built from them, rather than fall into the trap that most horror movie sequels fall into, where they just try and rehash everything from the original. So that's what I love about Insidious Chapter 2, is that I don't think it's better than the first one, but I think that they did do a good job of taking the things that worked from the first one and they kind of turned up the volume a little bit, you know, turned it up a few notches.
Definitely.
Which I liked about it.
Unless the entire movie is about the space-time continuum, don't include the space-time continuum at the end. Like they did that where he went to the past or to talk to himself.
They showed it in the first one.
Well,
Because they showed the spirits going through pretty much how they all died. Remember, you saw the girl,
well, yeah,
you
that
heard
was
the girl
what-
cock the shotgun.
That
That's
was
the
what those
space-time.
that was what those images were. Where they
Yeah, I
pretty
understand
much-
that. I just didn't.
That was a hint that that was the past.
It was pretty much projections of what happened in their lives.
I just don't like the idea of messing with the space-time continuum. I like the idea of them going into the further another dimension where the dead go before they pass on to whatever life they go to after that. I thought that was a really cool idea. But I thought they would live in the moment of where they died rather than just be if you ever go to the further, they'd be able to see something from. There'd be stuff all over the place then. Why would there just be showing random events happening there? Like, why wouldn't they have people from like 10,000 years ago in that same spot before the house was built, just have them there instead. Then it doesn't make sense. The whole thing could just keep repeating with thousands of images going around you.
Well, I will agree that anytime you try to deal with time travel in your story, it's...
I feel like the whole thing needs to be about time travel, not just hints and little pieces of things.
Well, anytime a film deals with time travel, it's very tricky. It's very hard to do properly.
That's why I think it shouldn't be in a movie, personally.
Not every film series can be the Back to the Future trilogy. Time travel is really tricky because there are so many ways to have loop.
There's just big plot holes
I
messing with that time continuum stuff.
I didn't really see any plot holes in it. That's why I loved it so much. I love that twist of how it ties in with the first film.
That was great.
You know, but it's so smart to me. You know, it just makes it all makes sense, and it makes me be able to go back and watch the first film and enjoy it even more because I know the reasons as to why.
I hear what you're saying. I just
things
disagree
happen.
with the space-time continuing, messing with that stuff. I like the further. That was a great idea, but I felt like it should have been in the moment where they died type of thing, rather than you be able to go back and forth in time in that zone. That would just screw with everything, in my opinion. Since I like the first one more, I would give that an overall B+, in my opinion. And then the second one, I would give just a B minus for the second one.
I think for me, the first film, if you would have asked me like when I first saw the first Insidious before I knew that there was going to be a sequel, I probably would have given it like an A- because of the ending. But I think now I don't really see anything that I hate about the first film at all. So I think I'm gonna go out on a limb and I'm gonna give it an A+. You know, this is, like I said, this is probably my favorite modern horror movie. You know, and when I say modern horror movie, I mean horror movies after the year 2000.
Yeah.
You know, and I just absolutely love the first film so much. And I do love the second film. I don't think it's quite as good, but I think it's good enough to be considered a phenomenal sequel. You know, especially when you consider the fact that so many sequels fail miserably.
Yeah.
You know, they did pretty damn good, you know, and they kind of...
Like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those failed miserably.
Oh, yeah.
The one thing that annoyed me about Insidious was that this older guy, the main character, couldn't beat the old black, or not the dude. That the plot twist with him being a guy was crazy. Like the lady in black ends up being a dude, just with a messed up background.
Yeah.
That he couldn't beat that spirit, but the kid was able to beat this Darth Maul demon with giant claws and everything.
When you really look at it, he was standing there talking to the woman in black, whereas the kid was running from the demon. So it kind of makes more sense that the kid would be able to get back to his body.
I know, it just
the
still
kid
like
really didn't beat it. He just got away from it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know that, but it's still like, how would he be able to get away from a Darth Maul giant demon claws? I don't know.
So for me, the Insidious Chapter 2, as far as my grading, I think, like I said, because it's not quite as good as the first one, I think I'd probably have to give it probably a B+, mainly because I think the things that they build on well, but they do kind of rehash a lot of the same scares several times, you know, and they do the scares in the same way to the point where if you're a fan of the first one, you're going to be able to watch Chapter 2 and be able to say, like, I saw the first one, I know what's going to happen.
Yeah, you kind of see what's coming half the time.
But it still scares the heck out of you.
It's still, yeah.
There was just like two twists in that movie I didn't see coming that blew my mind. The fact that when he was just playing the piano and all that, and that was crazy. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, and I love that little thing that he was playing the wife's song.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you guys picked up on that.
I thought that, yeah.
I didn't until I actually saw him. I didn't until I was freaking out the whole time. I was like, oh god, not again, another demon.
If there are such things as ghosts, and if you know these types of things do exist, I think these movies are probably the best, probably the most accurate representation of what it would be like to see a ghost.
Yeah, probably.
Because it's done in a really realistic way. It looks like you're seeing an actual...
Yeah.
You feel like you're seeing a ghost, you know, when you see these things on screen, to me anyway.
What I would give for the first movie, I would agree with him and say I'd give it an A+. But and for the second one, I definitely agree with him again and say B+, because I thought they were both great. The second one was done really well, too. You know, it didn't just completely bomb like a lot of sequels do. That's why I loved it, and it furthered the story and it gave you the ending that you were looking for that family.
The most important thing at the end of the day is that James Wan and Leigh Whannell set out to make a quality film, 2 quality films. They weren't out to try and make money, to score a quick buck. Even with the sequel, they weren't trying to score a quick buck.
Yeah, they took their time with it too.
Yes, they tried
which
to
I
make,
thought was really good.
and it just all the more reason why I love both of those guys, and I absolutely love James Wan, and that's why I absolutely love both Insidious movies, Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this episode of FearFlix. Let us know, leave a comment what you thought of both Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2. If you haven't seen either one of those movies, you should definitely check them out. Leave a comment, let us know what you thought of them. Like this video, please subscribe. Subscribe to my buddies Simply Stimpy and King Darrenitis, kick-ass channels.
Oh yeah.
And subscribe to me if you're not already. Thanks again for watching FearFlix, and I will see you next time.